A woman in rural Paz County, Arizona, turns the handle on her kitchen faucet at 6 in the morning, and all she hears is the hiss of air. There is no water because her well has been dry for 3 days. Less than a mile down the road, an industrial pump owned by a Saudi-backed company is pulling 60 million gallons of water out of the same desert every single day for free. Every word of that is literal. 60 million gallons a day with no water meter, no usage fee, and no limit. Meanwhile, 200 miles east, the city of Scottsdale is running television ads begging you to take a shorter shower. The average American uses about 17 gallons of water in an 8-minute shower. So when the federal government declared the first ever Tier 1 water shortage on the Colorado River back in 2021, the message to ordinary people was loud and constant. Conserve, ration, feel guilty about every drop. Hey, here's the math nobody puts on those billboards. If you cut your shower to 4 minutes, you save roughly 8 gallons. And here's the part that should make you furious. That foreign corporate farm pumps the equivalent of 7 million of your shorter showers in a single day, and it pays nothing for the water itself. The guilt aimed at your faucet is a deliberate distraction. They made you feel responsible on purpose. The water shortage in your home is not an accident. It is a system built quietly to let industrial extraction run wild while you watch your own faucet. And I'm going to show you something most people never connect. How your next search query on your phone is now competing directly for the same water that dessert family needs to stay alive. To understand how this is even legal, you have to understand a deliberate line drawn on a map. In 1980, Arizona passed the Groundwater Management Act, which created strictly monitored zones called active management areas. Inside those zones, around the big cities, every gallon pumped is metered and tracked. But here's the part they don't advertise. Nearly 80% of Arizona's landmass sits outside those zones. Out there, the state requires 0 meters, no exceptions. So what happens when a residential straw and an industrial pipeline reach into the exact same underground puddle? Let's go back to that family in the rural county because their financial disaster is now playing out in thousands of households. Picture a working-class homeowner who bought a few acres years ago and drilled a well to 250 feet, the historically standard depth that always hit clean water. For decades, it worked perfectly. Then a corporate agricultural operation buys the land next door and sinks an industrial well down to 1,200 feet. That pump never sleeps. Running 24 hours a day, it creates what hydrologists call a cone of depression, which is exactly what it sounds like. The massive pump drains the water table into a crater around itself, and all the water under the neighboring properties slides downhill into that crater. The shallow residential wells are left sucking on dry rock. First, the homeowner's pump motor burns itself out trying to pull up mud and air. That repair alone runs about $1,500, gone overnight. Then they call a state-certified well driller, and they learn the wait list is 8 to 12 months long, because every neighbor is in the same emergency. To chase the water table down to where it fled, they need a new, deeper well. The price for that is roughly $40,000. So a family that did nothing wrong takes out a 5-year personal loan at 12% interest just to keep water coming out of their own kitchen sink. They are now financing a basic survival need, with interest because of a corporation next door that pays 0 for the water it took. Why is that corporation drilling so deep and so fast? And where on earth are all those millions of gallons actually going? The answer involves a flight of 8,000 miles. In 2016, Saudi Arabia formally banned growing alfalfa inside its own borders because the kingdom was draining its own aquifers into collapse. Alfalfa is a thirsty crop used as cattle feed, and the Saudis decided they could no longer afford to grow it on their own soil. It was a sensible, responsible decision for their own country. So here's what they did instead. They did not stop growing it. They simply moved the problem into someone else's backyard, and that backyard turned out to be yours. 2 years earlier, anticipating the ban, the Saudi dairy conglomerate Almarai spent $47.5 million buying 10,000 acres near Vicksburg, Arizona, through a subsidiary called Fondomonte. Then the Arizona State Land Department leased them additional public land in Butler Valley for about $25 an acre per year, a fraction of the real market rate. To see why this works, picture a restaurant where every diner shares one enormous milkshake in the center of the table. There's exactly one rule. You may only drink with a straw for personal use at your seat. But nobody wrote a rule about the size of your straw. So one diner walks in, ignores the little paper straws, and connects a fire hose to the glass. Legally, the restaurant has to protect the fire hose, because technically, he is still just a guy drinking from the shared milkshake. That fire hose is a real legal doctrine. It comes from a 1953 Arizona Supreme Court ruling that affirmed the Doctrine of Reasonable Use, which means if you own the dirt on top, you can pump as much water from underneath it as you want, as long as you use it on that land. Growing hay counts as personal use, and there is no upper limit on how much you can take. Think about that for a second. a legal principle written 70 years ago, decades before anyone imagined a foreign government farming the American desert, is the exact loophole keeping that fire hose legal today. Nobody updated the rule, they simply went looking for it and used it. Alfalfa grown in the Arizona desert demands about 6 acre-feet of water per year, which is nearly 1.9 million gallons for every single acre. Multiply that across 10,000 acres, and the numbers stop sounding like farming and start sounding like a drain plug pulled out of the desert. The crop gets baled, trucked to the port of Los Angeles, and shipped across the ocean to feed dairy cows in the Middle East. Economists have a clean name for this. It's called virtual water trade, where you hide water exports inside water-heavy products like hay and ship the water out of the country without anyone counting the gallons. And for all of that water, Fondomonte paid the state of Arizona nothing at all. A foreign nation is draining an American aquifer dry, and the final bill comes to zero. Foreign agriculture is the oldest industry exploiting this loophole. But a new industry just walked in, far richer and far quieter, and it is reaching for the exact same milkshake. Google is building a $1 billion data center complex called Redhawk in Mesa, Arizona. To get it, the city of Mesa guaranteed Google a supply of up to 4 million gallons of water per day. They do not use it for drinking, they use it exclusively for cooling. At its peak, that is enough water to supply an entire town of 40,000 people. The chips inside these buildings run so hot that each one can put out as much heat as a small space heater, and you have to multiply that by tens of thousands, all packed into one room. To stop the servers from cooking themselves, these facilities use evaporative cooling towers, which are industrial systems that blast heat away by boiling off clean water into the air. And here's the cruel detail. They deliberately avoid using recycled gray water because the minerals in dirty water calcify and destroy the equipment. So they demand high-quality, potable drinking water, the same water you would pour into a glass just to evaporate it into the sky. And this is not a small leak that stays the same size because the demand is accelerating fast with every passing year. In 2022 alone, Google's global data center water consumption jumped 20% in 1 year, hitting 5.6 billion gallons. Microsoft has planted the same kind of thirsty facilities in the desert at Goodyear just down the highway. And in Goodyear, residents finally saw the trade coming, and they tried to stop it. When the plans for these campuses moved through city approval, people packed local council meetings to ask a simple question. How many gallons a day will this thing pull from our supply, and what happens to our water bills when it does? And here's the real problem with all of this. Much of that information is sealed. These deals are routinely structured as economic development agreements, and the specific water figures get treated as confidential business terms, hidden from the very residents whose aquifer is on the table. So people show up to fight a project, and they are not even allowed to see how thirsty it is. The zoning vote passes, the construction crews arrive, and the cooling towers start breathing and drinking water before anyone outside the negotiating room understands the full scale of what was approved. And that is the trap they walk into. The fight happens in rooms where the numbers are blacked out, against companies with the best lawyers money can buy, in towns desperate for the jobs and the tax base that a tech campus promises. Now connect it to your hand. A standard run of AI prompts, somewhere between 10 and 50 questions to a chatbot, consumes roughly one 500 milliliter bottle of fresh water through these cooling systems. So picture the trade in full. You install a rain barrel, you time your showers, you do everything the billboard asked. Then you pick up your phone and ask an AI assistant a few questions, and the water you carefully saved at home evaporates off a server rack you will never see. Your conservation did not save the aquifer. It just freed up the gallons for the machine to drink. Can one person actually fight off both a foreign sovereign wealth fund and a $1 trillion tech empire reaching for the same water? Over 2,000 dry residential wells have been reported to the Arizona Department of Water Resources since 2015. 2,000 families turning a handle and getting nothing but air. All of it is happening on top of what the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation officially calls a 23-year megadrought across the Southwest. The driest stretch the region has seen in over a millennium. There was one real victory worth talking about. In October of 2023, Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs canceled a prime Fondomonte lease in Butler Valley, saving an estimated 2 million gallons a day. But read the fine print on how they won. The state could not beat the company on water law because the law protects the giant industrial wells. So they evicted Fondomonte on a technicality. They were evicted over a bookkeeping violation, a default over missing secondary containment for diesel fuel tanks. Fondomonte still owns and pumps water on thousands of acres of private land right nearby. That is why the real fight is not in the governor's office. It is in the rural counties, where activists are now pushing to create rural groundwater management councils. The idea behind them is straightforward enough. Right now, the 1980 law only protects the cities, leaving the entire rural 80% of the state with no meters and no limits. These councils would let rural residents finally measure how much is being pumped from under their feet set a ceiling on total withdrawals, and force the giant industrial wells to register and report, the same way city wells already do. For the first time, a family watching their well die could point to a number and say, "That pump took my water, and here is the proof." The catch is that every one of these proposals has to survive a state legislature heavily lobbied by agriculture and industry, which is why the fight is slow, local, and almost invisible. It is happening in county meetings most people never hear about, and it is the only thing standing between the loophole and the rest of the aquifer. Here is the reality of the system. The shame aimed at your shower is a public relations product. Whether you save 8 gallons or 80, it is mathematically irrelevant next to 60 million gallons a day flowing into hay and server racks. That guilt was manufactured to keep your eyes on your own faucet instead of the giant industrial wells. And that woman in Paz County, the one who heard nothing but air, she is still there in that same house. She still pays a private bank every month on the $40,000 loan she took to drill deeper at 12% interest. From her kitchen window, she watches semi-trucks roll past, some hauling foreign-owned hay toward the coast, some hauling cooling equipment toward the next data center. Her water's on those trucks. People keep saying Arizona is failing to manage its water. That is the wrong word for it. The system is not failing at all. It is managing the transfer of a public aquifer with brutal efficiency straight onto corporate balance sheets. The water's being managed perfectly. It is just not being managed for you. So drop a comment and tell me what you think. And if you live near one of these data centers, or your own well has ever run dry, I genuinely want to hear about it. Another video is right here. The algorithm picked it for you. See you there.
Her faucet hisses air while the fire hose drinks free. 60 million gallons gone on me to no fee. 40 grand to drill deeper, 12% on the loan. 80% of the map left, no one to own. The system isn't broken. It was never built for you.